Well, welcome to you all. My name is Peter Marks. I'm the chief theater critic of the Washington Post. I am thrilled myself to get to see these scenes from West Side Story and to talk to these illustrious members of the creative team and the cast. We're going to see 4 numbers from the show tonight and talk a little bit about the way this very, very extraordinary, provocative version of West Side Story came to be. And I will turn over each of the segments to Anne Teresa De Keersmaeker for her to introduce each of the musical numbers. Just a word of, I just wanted to say in the interest of full disclosure, I played Bernardo in high school. And I am still available if something befalls any cast member. I say that, you know, just because one of the reasons it's such a show that's dear to me is because we didn't, as students in high school, really know what we were doing with this show. And certainly, we couldn't possibly recreate the choreography of Jerome Robbins on the stage of East Brunswick High School in New Jersey. So I'm really curious, because we didn't think necessarily that all the movement and all of the action of the play was sacred or sacrosanct, that I think in that same spirit, this production is taking a fresh look at this piece, and we will talk about that. Let me just first introduce the panel. To my immediate right is the choreographer, Anne Teresa De Keersmaeker. Right. Got it? To her right is the director, Ivo van Hove. The gentleman seated immediate next to him is Isaac Powell, who plays Tony. And last but not least is Dharon E. Jones, who plays Riff. So you're getting the, you know, a great chunk of this show tonight. As I said, I'm dying to see. They've been in previews for now 6 weeks, 7 weeks. It's a technically very, very rigorous show. Lots of things happen that have never happened in West Side Story before. And one of the most important things that's changed, I think, how many, by the way, have people here seen this production already? Okay, so there's a healthy sort of, you know, eighth of the audience that has seen the show. For those who haven't gone, Anne Teresa, maybe you should talk a little bit about what your assignment was in terms of following in Robbins' footsteps in choreographing this show, which seems almost, to some purists, an act of heresy.
Well, it was announced that I had to follow God, because that's how Jerome Robbins is very much defined, and of course it is rightly. I have an enormous respect, not only for Robbins, but for those 4 people who were the first creators. But when Ivo called me with the question, are you interested in choreograph a West Side Story? I was a little bit, oh no, don't ask me this. Because of course this is not restaging an American classic, but in terms of choreography, it's maybe re-choreographing the American classic with not only for Americans, but all over the world, because of the film mainly. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows the music, but everybody knows the moves and the snaps and the leaps, and so.
Did you know it back in Belgium?
Well, I knew it mainly through the film. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do consider that the history of contemporary and history of modern dance is not exclusively, but in a big part, it's the history that is of American heritage. Mm. And in the history of a musical theater, I think West Side Story, in the way how dance, music, and theater come together, and the way how brilliantly Jerome Robbins brought together the theater with the dance, responding to the music, is indeed very, 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 it was brilliant. So I think it was Ivo who sort of pulled me over the bridge by saying, well, don't, I think I was more scared than he. He said, you know, it's not the first time I'm dealing with, with American classics. So I ask you because I want you to do your own thing with it. So after this initial doubt, I said, okay, yeah, let's go for it.
Maybe you didn't know what you were getting into, Anne Teresa.
Definitely not.
Ivo, I'm curious, you know, you have delved into the American canon over and over again. You did an amazing production of View from the Bridge, The Crucible on Broadway.
Thank you.
I still have nightmares about that Athabascan dog that stared at me from the stage of The Crucible. You've looked, is there any American classic you don't think needs to be rethought?
Listen, but I can answer it in a positive way. I'm really deeply in love with American classics from the 20th century, because it's classics, yes, but it's recent. Because what I love about it, and it's also the case with West Side Story, they always talk about community, actually. Like
Community.
Crucible is about a community, but they always have very specific and very extreme individuals amidst them. And it's this battle between how can you be yourself within a community, and how that is sometimes impossible, you know. And I think the American classics from the 20th century dealt with it in a very deep way, and it was the same with The Crucible, with The View from the Bridge also somehow, and also with the West Side Story.
What was the impulse? Where did it start for you?
Well, it's a very strange thing. 2016, I remember it very vividly, because I was here doing The Crucible. It was a year that I spent almost the whole season here, because I was doing The View from the Bridge, I was doing Lazarus, the David Bowie musical at the New York Theatre Workshop, and I was doing Crucible. So I was here for a long time, and at the same time there was this Republican debates with Trump. There were, I don't know how many, there were 15 candidates, and Trump was at the side in the beginning, you know, on television. And every debate he was moving up, and he was in the middle at the end. So suddenly we were in a different America. Anyway, for me, a different America as I was used to know it. And so in America also where you could say very blunt things, where you could say very, well, what you could call extreme things also about racism, about the others, about immigration, about integration. And step by step by step by step, I thought, well, West Side Story talks about this a little bit. And that's how it really started to happen.
Huh. I was really hoping we were going to get through this evening without mentioning his name, but...
Sorry. Yeah, but
what can you do? Anyway, Isaac, for you, I mean, Isaac and Dharon, did you know the piece before you did it?
Yeah, I mean, it's West Side Story. It's kind of hard to escape, especially if you're somebody who is trying to make a career in musical theater. So it's always been there. It was the very first production I ever auditioned for in my hometown in Greensboro that I didn't get into, which stung because I was like a boy in North Carolina and they needed boys, and yet I didn't get into this West Side Story production. So it was always in the back of my head as something where there.
You mean I got into my production, but you didn't get in yours? That's amazing. Dharon, what did you when you walked in the door the first day of rehearsal? What did Ivo tell you about this production that made you think this was going to be a different kind of West Side Story, or did you think that?
Well, I actually got the opportunity to be part of the lab, the dance developmental lab that we did in November and December of 2018, and that was the first time I met Ivo and Anna. And the second we started doing just the moves, I was completely mesmerized, and thought this is going to be a totally different West Side Story than anyone's ever seen before. And that was just exciting to me, being this young kid from New York City, growing up in Brooklyn. Doing West Side Story was like a dream, so doing it and like revolutionizing it and making it speak to the society of today was something that's very special to me, so I was completely on board.
One of the things that seems, I haven't seen it, so I don't know for sure, but seems very radical to me about this production. Not only is it intermissionless, which it's usually a 2-hour and 40-minute show. This one runs about 1 hour 45. That not only have you extracted the Dream Ballet, but you've also taken I Feel Pretty out of the show, which seemed to me strange. Explain to us what your thought process was. What were you going for in trying to reimagine the story without those elements? This is the advanced placement
I'm going to be
question.
the most hated person tonight. Well, when in 2016, when I started to think about it, and I went to Scott Rudin, the producer, because I knew that if there's one person who can produce it, it's him. I had a few basic principles, and one was, and it seems like a marketing thing, but it's not a marketing thing at all for me anyway. I said, yeah, I want to make a West Side Story for the 21st century. With all my respect, and I mean it as Anne Teresa said before, with all my respect for the people that have made it in the end of the 50s of the last century, but it's a long time ago, but we still live a little bit in the same world. You know, all the elements, all the themes that are in this musical, poverty, immigration, integration, racism, bias, abuse of police, you know, all these things are still happening on the streets every day, wherever in New York, America, but also in the world. So I wanted to make a West Side Story for the 21st century. That was my issue. And then there's consequences then. You know? So we looked deep into the script, deep into the score, and the first thing I thought, well, the cast has to be really right this time, you know, in a way that didn't want the Jets to be the white Americans. I think the Jets should be Americans, as we all know them, you know. Dharon is New Yorker, he is not white, you know. I heard tonight that you're from Indian descent, you know, one of the...
Native Americans.
Yeah, Native Americans, the Indians. Well, that's how we call them. Sorry, I'm European, sorry. Did I say something wrong? Sorry. So, I mean, there is... The Americans, he is an American actually deep down. That's the only one. So Americans don't exist.
No. You're great.
So that's how I started to think in any way, like the Jets should be like the Americans that we know, that we see on the subway every day. You know, not like only white people. And then the next step really was like to delve into the themes. That was for me the most important thing, that the darkness, because at the end of Act 1, if you would do the show with an intermission, there is 2 dead bodies on stage. And these dead bodies, you know, that never it was intended to kill somebody. You know, these guys, the Jets and the Sharks, they have rumbles, but that's fist fights. They are never intended to kill somebody. But step by step, because there is no time to think, no time to consider, the whole thing happens within 2 days, actually, within a very limited amount of time. The most terrible things happen. The other thing which interested me is that it's a world, all these kids are on the street. The parents are seen to be absent. For instance, the parents of Riff, but Dharon plays, you know, they seem not to care about him because he lives with Isaac, you know, somewhere. So these kids are, well, hurt, actually. Deep down, you don't know exactly where it comes from, what it is exactly, but all these things spoke to me in a way that was a little bit, that created a show that was more extreme and that I thought should have no intermission, because it's like once you cross a line, the crossing of the line is the killing of you go into the abyss. And then I feel pretty suddenly felt like really difficult after the rumble, when you do it without intermission. The misunderstanding is because people say we cut the ballet, which is not true, because somewhere is in. I read a lot in little messages left and right, that we cut somewhere. Somewhere is never been cut. Somewhere is in it, in a little bit a different version, but it's still in it. So the idea of the ballet is in the production. So I think we were in close contact also with the estates, all of them, because we wanted also that they approved and they could recognize the original intentions, but now 70 years later, and that's what we tried to do together.
So, Anne Teresa, you had the really heavy lift of rethinking this. Where did you start with that process?
Well, like I start with every production. Jerome Robbins came from a background both from ballet and had done musical theater before, but his main background was ballet. That is not my case. I come from a background of modern dance, postmodern dance. When I studied here in New York, I was not mainly interested in Jerome Robbins, but way much more in the downtown postmodern thing. For me, the big examples were Robert Wilson, Yvonne Reiner, Steve Paxton, Trisha Brown. That are my examples. Now, the efficiency of Robbins, I think, had to do with a number of things. I first think to a certain degree, simplicity and clarity. That was, I think, due to his classical ballet architecture, but also in the way how he related from daily movement into efficient choreographic flow. In the beginning they walk, and then there is these first hops that introduce.
And then a little spins and.
Yeah, very simple movement.
Right.
Very simple movement. When you look at it, and the movement is not so much sophisticated, but efficient. So I think the work for a choreographer is different as a director, in the sense that a director starts from a text, but a choreographer has to write a text and then direct it. So your first step, what you have to do is develop vocabulary before you start to develop a grammar is vocabulary. And very often I start from, like Robbins could, as he comes from ballet, can refer to classical ballet. Yeah, we use a codified language. Each time we make a piece, I have to develop new vocabulary. So very often I start from existing vocabulary, from previous pieces, and then I start to transform them alchemically, do them in a bath, and very often I start from one basic phrase that then I make transformations. And what was happening in the process is that I prepared a lot of material with the Rosa's dancers in Brussels.
Got it.
And then that material was developed during the lab, where the dancers were learning that vocabulary, and then we made also the step that I developed with them, with the dancers, new vocabulary.
Dharon, you're from Brooklyn.
I'm from Brooklyn, yes.
So you know this terrain, this New York terrain that Ivo and Anne Teresa are creating. What could you tell them that helped them, or what could you show them that helped them understand that language?
I think one of the things that they both stressed from the beginning of the process was be yourself. and bring that to the character. So hearing that, I immediately thought, well, if this is West Side Story and I'm from New York, then I should bring that. And I grew up in Bed-Stuy, and I try to bring parts of my neighborhood, parts of my childhood, parts of my school experiences to my character, how I feel towards authority, how I feel about just being in this situation. And I think that has been the most fun part of this, but also one of the hardest parts of it, because it's vulnerable to sort of to bring that to the stage and have people see it every night. But we've created such a positive and comfortable atmosphere that we can play and we can mess up and we can experiment on stage. And if it's in the wrong direction, they will both tell us very quickly. And if it's in the right direction, they'll tell us to keep going and dig deeper and go further because your instincts are true. So it's been like a joyful process for me to be able to bring parts of my home to the stage every night. Definitely.
I was recently attended a production of A Chorus Line in Washington, D.C. that re-choreographed that show, and of course, the identity of the show is so tied into Michael Bennett's vision of how people move. But as the choreographer of that show said to me, that show is from the 1970s. Bodies move differently now than they did back then. And it certainly had to be the case for the 1950s. Between now and then. Is there truth in that for you, Anne Teresa? Are the way young dancers move, does that give you ideas for movement that wouldn't have been possible back in the 50s when Robbins was putting this all together?
Well, yeah, I think there were two crucial aspects. First of all was how to differentiate the vocabulary of the Jets and the Sharks. And that was a really very delicate issue because, Robbins asked another choreographer to come in to write and dance at the gym to Latinize.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So that was also something, for me that I don't know tap dancing, I don't know, I did some tango, but or Latino
Mambo?
dancing, yeah, mambo, well, basic step, but for the next, it's something that I don't
You don't?
possess. So that was a really crucial aspect, and there were several people who were helping that, and in the first place also the dancers themselves. The dancers themselves who came with material. Then. And then there was also the fact that in the dance at the gym, the blues and the mambo. So the question is, okay, when young people go to dance today, they do house dancing, hip hop dancing, and so. So that was for me evident that somehow had to be present in it. And the challenge was how to get a strong fusion kitchen, yeah.
A fusion kitchen.
Well, where those different influences
Right.
are present without that you get something which is stylistically weird combination.
So what did they?
That was not easy to.
So what did
find.
they teach you? Did they show you things you didn't know?
Oh yeah, because for example, what we did for the blues, it was somebody coming in who worked on house rhythms. And then I thought in music, organization of time is always the same. So we learned very specifically rhythmical patterns which were linked to the mambo and the blues. And then the dancers, I asked them to propose material that respected those rhythms, but that were their moves. And that is what you see in dance at the gym. But it's a long process because it meant, first of all, creating vocabulary, new vocabulary with them before you can really start to choreograph.
If you've seen an Ivo van Hove production over the last several years, you also know, if you saw Network, for example, you know that he often uses video. He uses cameras on stage circulating with screens. This has a video wall, as I understand it, a giant video wall along tiny. It's a tiny video wall?
Just a little 70-foot screen.
This is a 1,700-seat theater. I assume it's not a tiny video wall. How much is that a factor, Ivo, in how you conceive what everyone else is going to be doing. Do you work that in afterwards? Or, at what point do you decide, I'm using this technique again? You work very closely, obviously, with your partner, Jan, who does your set and video design. But can you, I'm trying to, is it a chicken and the egg? Do you come to the show and say, this one's going to have cameras again? Or, how does that start?
Yeah, it's a kind of a basic decision. For instance, you refer to a view from the bridge, there's no video there.
Right.
It was clear from the beginning that we were not going to use it. Here it was like, I think when I go back to my notes in 2016, on the first page there was video wall. That was clear that it had to be an empty canvas when it starts. We shouldn't tell too much, of course, because it's spoilers, a little bit, but okay.
Well,
we're here.
We got to fill the time with something.
Don't tell. But in the beginning you think it's like an empty space. It's like an empty space, and then it turns out not to be really an empty space.
Are you feeling like this is something you want people to be surprised by? Is that why you said that? You're worried that it's like, this is I'm giving away all your tricks?
We shouldn't do that, I think, but okay, but I can do, but it was clear from the beginning that video could create spaces.
I haven't seen it, by the way, so I'm like going on what I hear and I've heard.
I know, but...
Sorry, go ahead, sorry.
So video was there from the beginning. It was really the first idea, and I said immediately to Jan, the basic thing: this will need a huge video wall, and it should be a kinetic production, and that's the way that we use video in different ways in this production. It is like live video. We have spaces that you wouldn't be able to see when you're in the theater as an audience. You wouldn't be able to see them. Now they are very close to you. That's one use of video. The other one is we have big scenes that are all pre-shoots, like America, like Krupke, which are for me very political scenes also. And then we have video that's a live video on stage for the dances, the big dances, which makes it much more complex, where you also see inserts of some of the dances, where you get an extra energy on top of the energy that you see already on stage. So we use video in this case in a much more complex way than we did before, I think. But it was clear that without this, also the video gives us the opportunity to make transitions between scenes seamlessly. Because normally, there is a scene, you end the scene, another set would move in, so there is transition music to move in the set, so it slows down the energy. And I think we live in different times. You were talking about, like we move different in the 70s than we would in the 50s, and also we talk much faster than we did in the 50s. We have a different energy, a different way of understanding things. So I wanted to have this new energy also within the design, you could say.
How far can you take this idea? One of the things that I've seen is, for example, when I've seen productions of Romeo and Juliet done in a modern context, in a 2019 context. I saw one where it began with Prince Aeschylus vacuuming the palace, believe it or not, with a Dyson. It's true. But then I thought, these metaphors don't always get carried along, because at the end of the play I thought, well, why didn't someone just call Romeo on the phone and tell him that, this is, don't drink the poison, or, stop, it's okay. How do you have to find a reality somewhere between 1957 and 2019?
Yeah, but now you're referring to, that's not the way that I see a new interpretation. It's not like a vacuum cleaner or a cell phone or a thing like that. That's like very helpful. That's not what it's really about.
I mean, I think it works in different ways. You have a huge contrast between an abstract, black, formal space, an empty space where only the bodies of the dancers, they carry the story. And then you have those extremely realistic backspaces that are behind. So there is a huge contrast between something extremely formal architectural, where there is no reference to some reality, and something extremely realistic. And that is, by that video wall, is dividing that and unifying that. The other aspect is, from the very beginning, it brings, as Ivo says, it brings you very close to Dharon, to Isaac. You see the spatial expressions, you get to know the beautiful reality of the physical reality of those people, which, if you don't have that, it's impossible. Because especially if you're sitting on a place very far away, you never get that intimacy.
So, Isaac, what does the video aspect do to your performance?
I don't really think it affects it that much. I think Ivo was pretty conscious of telling us in the beginning, we're not playing for cameras. We're still, just do your normal acting. So I don't think it really affects me too much, but I am aware that, certain things can be a little more nuanced because I know it'll be registered by people who are sitting in the back of the house in a way that wouldn't be possible if there were no cameras. So it's certainly something that I think about, but I don't necessarily find myself, adjusting or trying to accommodate the cameras.
And some of the actors actually operate the cameras as well, correct? Do you ever do that?
No. I don't. Do you?
I don't do it either, no.
So how hard was it to cast? I mean, I've noticed, for example, that these actors look incredibly young. They look like teenagers, which, of course, is really what the look that you were going for. I mean, how did you find your Tony and Maria? What did that entail?
But what you say, that was one of the basic things for me that I said we need to have really young people on stage because that's what this talks about. And I don't remember the amount, but when we started, it was said that we have over 30 Broadway debuts.
33, I think, in the show.
33, so that's an enormous amount. So, and it took us a year.
A year of casting?
I think we saw over 1,700 people. Not us, we didn't see them all, but there were also people that were cast in Los Angeles, in Miami, other places, So it was a huge process because we really wanted people that would be really totally believable also age-wise. It was not only what I talked about, about the heritage and where they come from, but also like age-wise, that you really could believe that these people are 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, that's because that's what it really talks about. Otherwise, this story couldn't happen the way it really happens.
Did you always agree? I mean, you had to look for people also who could move incredibly well. They had to look great. They had to move well. They had to be able to act. They had to look.
Yeah, but we were very, like Tony, for instance, that was my thing in the way that the basic thing that Tony needs to do is sing very well. So that's Alex Gimignano, who is not here, but who is and he has to act very well. And for instance, Riff, that's very clear that he has to act very well and that he has to dance very well also. There were the different ways of, and I think it was very easy actually between us because there is a kind of taste that you develop together when you sit so many hours together in a room. You develop a taste for, and you talk about this is what we want, this is what we don't want, that's why we don't want it. So it's also like a process that developed slowly over that year.
To make people that as a group are believable and strong and that can be very strong as individuals, and that makes you want to have a group which is harmonized, but it is in the same time there are very strong individuals physically, energy-wise.
Makes sense.
And it was difficult, especially also for certain roles, because not only the music of Bernstein is sophisticated music. It's already in those times it was considered as being too difficult.
Oddly enough, it lost the Tony award to The Music Man, which is kind of fascinating. This was the groundbreaking movie. You can see almost the war that those two shows would have with the Sharks and the Jets of the time. Basically, the real sort of formulaic, in a beautiful way, Music Man, and this groundbreaking thing that people really didn't even know how to, in some instances, respond to. So it was always, that ahead of its time thing. But I was also curious in the casting, as I understand it, the Sharks and the Jets are sort of both a mix of races. It's not like one ethnic group versus another ethnic group.
No, the Sharks are all
Like two gangs, essentially.
No, but the Sharks
are still Latinx.
Latinos, and Latinas.
Latinx.
You know, that was for me very important.
It was.
So it's, you could say, two cultures.
And the Jets are
an anthology of what is called American.
Interesting.
Which is what it says on the first page of the script.
I got it. Yeah.
It meant something very different in 1957 than it does today in terms of representation. So,
does it Isaac and Dharon? Does it feel like it belongs to you? You know, it did that way. I guess after I did our production. It belongs to a part of American culture. But does it feel like it tells a story that you feel in your bones?
Yeah, we've had a lot of in-depth conversations about what this show and what this story means to each and every one of us. Particularly for me, when we were workshopping Officer Krupke, we had extensive conversations about what does racial injustice mean, and what does this mean to you, and how does this affect you, and we all kind of made that clear in the room. So I think just going off of that, going forward, it's been a process to make the show ours, in ways of it tells our story, but in ways of that we can do this every night and feel good about ourselves as well too. And I think
not having to turn off certain parts of ourselves to be able to tell the story.
Exactly. I feel that I can bring my own experiences, like I said, bring my own experiences to the show, day in and day day in and day out, and I can bring my anger, I can bring my love, I can bring my whatever I'm angry about that day, because it speaks to today. I can use that to fuel any sort of thing that is in this show, because it's so just true and about people and about humans and about how we deal with love and how we deal with hate and how we deal with injustice and all that kind of stuff.
I know from the Crucible, Ivo, nature sort of intrudes on your shows in interesting ways on the stage. Things happen, supernatural things in that particular play, but I remember the storms, and there was this sense of nature participating in the story. In this West Side Story, you have decided to, in terms of the rumble at the end of Act 1, and I'm sorry if I'm giving this away. I was told to give this away anyway. There's a rainstorm that the actors and the dancers are fighting through. Was this something that, again, was sort of out of your original conception, or was it one of those things that came to you as you watched these actors moving?
No, it was before. It was, I don't know, because there's also a lot of, like us, a little bit older people here, so perhaps they know the movies of the Japanese Kurosawa, and it was a little bit inspired by the Kurosawa movies. In the Kurosawa movies, a lot of the battles, like the Macbeth, that it's not called Macbeth, but it's a Macbeth story that he did. There's a fabulous showdown, big fight, and it's in his movies. It's almost always in majestuous and enormous floods of rain.
Right.
And that was the inspiration, to this. But I think I'm a kid of the 70s. I was born in '58, the year of West Side Story, actually. But I was a young man an adolescent in the 70s, and I was very much inspired by performance art also in these days, because it was the age of performance art, and I loved to have in my You were referring to the wolf in the Crucible. It's a real animal, and the animal walks by itself on stage and was trained. It was an amazing thing to look into the audience, he had the most rehearsals of every actor because it was almost impossible to make it happen, but it happened every night, and it's like a physical thing happening then, a real thing.
Got it.
It's not an actor. So I like to bring actors and dancers in circumstances where there is something real happening, which you cannot escape.
So, you know, the two prisoners of the scene are here. They have to dance through this rainstorm.
Dharon loves the rain. I'm not sure.
Oh, I love it.
I love the rain. Yeah.
Really?
It's.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's thrilling. I mean, it's so much fun. Like Ivo was saying, to have something real, to have something, an element like that, I find that it, I don't know, it focuses me, and it
brings me into the scene almost
Yeah.
immediately. Like, it's just, bless you. It's one of those things. It's one of those things where, like, the second it happens, your mind sort of just like, and like now, like everything seems so real, and it's like stops being a show all of a sudden, and it turns, and like now you're like in the moment, and you're like, oh my God, it's raining. Somebody just died. Like, what is happening? Blah blah blah. Like, it's just really crazy how turn of events starts in your head.
It sort of relieves you of having to do that bit of imaginative labor of putting yourself in these circumstances when they're built so plainly for us into the structure of it. Like even the hyper-realistic nature of the sets that are behind the video screen, and the ones that are off stage as well, it makes it really fun to play in as an actor because I don't have to imagine that there is a fourth wall there.
Right.
You know, we actually get to go behind and be in these hyper-realistic sets, and taking away that little bit of imaginative labor lets you really invest more in that.
How do you do that kind of stuff in wet flooring?
With a lot of sandpaper on the bottom of your shoe.
Yep. A lot of that, and a lot of, like I said, it's going to rain every day for the rest of our lives for like the next year, you know, kind of thing. So like, I'm just looking forward to it, but as an actor, it just makes our jobs easier because it puts us there, and we don't have, like Isaac said, we don't have to imagine it. Yeah. But it's like almost a blessing to sort of be put in those circumstances so that it seems so real to you that the acting comes naturally.
And it's unique. It's a unique experience for an actor too to be given. Well, this is actually the second Broadway show I've done with rain in it, so I guess it's not that unique. But it's it's fun. How often do you get to do things like this where all of these incredible theatrical devices are being used, and it's just fun. It's just fun to be in the rain on a stage in front of 1,700 people. It's so cool.
As a dancer, like growing up watching all the Step Up movies, like dancing in rain was something I like dreamed of. So like, first Broadway show, checking that off, I'm pretty happy about it. Not gonna lie.
Oh yeah, and Fred Astaire, yeah. That's what you said.
Yeah.
What was that?
Everywhere.
I missed that.
Well,
Like Fred Astaire.
Fred Astaire dancing in the rain.
Well,
I
it's
just
Gene
wanna-
Kelly that dances in
no,
the rain.
she's the Fred Astaire. It's Gene Kelly. Oh my God. I just wanted to add one thing, is that for me it was also the very first time that Ivo and I worked together, and it has been an incredibly intense learning process about this. All the time choices were made for what's the story you want to tell. That was like daily issue. You know, for me, I would consider myself as being way much more a formalist and think in a choreographic way, you know. And this was each scene where choices had to be made. There was a constant, sometimes questioning and even discussion. So what is the point you want to make? And that was by moments not easy. What's the story you want to tell? What is the priority? What is the readability? What does an audience understand? So that was challenging but very interesting.
This is helping me so much with the writing of my review. I'm going to do this with every show now because it's so great. Counter phrases. Now I know what you're working at. It's going to sound so informed. Isaac, I'm just curious. As you were speaking, it dawned on me that when Ivo said 1,700 people were seen for this role, and they weren't all reading for Tony, but that's an incredible achievement to be the one selected.
Yeah, it's actually really mind-blowing. It really is. All the way up until my final callback, I never believed I was gonna get this part. It was never even on my bucket list of ones that I wanted to do. And I remember even when this first got announced, when I read the headline that Ivo and Anne Teresa were doing this revival, I turned to my fiance and I showed him the press release, and I said I would sweep the rehearsal room floors just to be in the room with these people while they're making this thing. I don't care what role I'm playing. I don't care what I'm doing. I would take anything just to be part of this. So to be doing it in this capacity is beyond my wildest dreams, and it's been the highlight of my very short career here. But
Well, you're 47 now, aren't you?
yes, just turned 47.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly special. I pinch myself every day. I could not be more lucky. It's a really, really extraordinary opportunity.
And so what have you guys, from working with this choreographer and this director with this other sensibility, bringing this other energy to New York, not having the canon sort of imposed on them and all the pressure that maybe American or Canadian directors and choreographers might feel, what has that freed up in you, if anything?
So much. I remember even in callbacks when you and I were working together a little bit, you took me out of the room and you said, forget everything you think you know about West Side Story and about this show and just bring your essence. And that's when I knew that we were doing something different and that we weren't beholden to these archetypes that were, canonized by Natalie Wood and Richard Beymer and these sort of almost antiquated archetypes of who these characters had been presented to us as. Sorry. I am so sorry. But it really liberated me to feel like I can just bring who I am to this. And
It's okay. I thought George Takiris had problems too. Anyway, go ahead.
It liberated me to, like I was saying, I don't have to turn off certain parts of myself to be able to tell this story, and that's really, really fun for me. Just not feeling like we have to do it the way that it's always been done. I don't think I'm capable of doing it that way. I think it would feel unnatural. It would feel false. So getting to do this and getting to highlight my own, unique qualities and idiosyncrasies and things, and not having to hide those parts of myself to tell the story is really, really fun.
It's great.